Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 100 of the In a Nutshell podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. Joe Meady's not with me today. He's a little under the weather. He'll be back for episode 101 later in the week. Getting the schedule out a little earlier now with our videos, so the viewers can know when they're coming out. But after that, let's just get into it. Episode 100. Our week one recap. We had a ton of games in the Big Ten, not all of which need to be talked about. Rutgers held on for a 3-point victory and a last-second field goal against Ohio. That was one that could have been really scary, but fortunately for the Scarlet Knights, they got the job done. Minnesota sort of, pulled away late. PJ Fleck and the Gophers start 1-0. Started a little slow, no points in the first quarter, but they were able to get Taylor 30 carries. They were able to get take care of business there. Wisconsin beat Miami 17-0. Not much to report there other than Billy Edwards did get injured, and he is expected to return for week 3 against Alabama. So that is something to look out for there for Wisconsin. Nebraska and Cincinnati, probably the biggest game here Thursday night in the Big Ten, and it wasn't the prettiest game, was a little bit back and forth. Cincinnati took an early lead. Then it was Nebraska that took control of the game. Really looked like they should win it, and in classic Nebraska fashion, they almost choked it. But they were able to hold on, get the job done. Dylan Raiola wins at Arrowhead in front of his idol. 2 big wins on Friday night for the Big Ten. We had Illinois dropping 52 on Western Illinois. They were able to get some of their starters out there early. Altmaier was really good. We had Michigan State beating Western. Childs, not bad. Nick Marsh scored the touchdown. Frazier hits 100 yards. So all things good there. We have the big one there on Saturday, but we'll go through the other ones here first. Penn State looked good. Oregon looked good. Michigan looked good in Bryce Underwood's first game. Justice Haynes, 3 touchdowns in his debut also. Indiana, a little bit of a slow start against Old Dominion. Fernando Mendoza took a little bit to get going. Still wasn't all that sharp, but Indiana takes care of business there. Maryland wins big. Purdue wins big. Iowa wins big. USC wins big. Washington pulls away from Colorado State. Not much to report in those games. We will go back to the game that was big noon kickoff on Saturday at the Horseshoe in Columbus. It was Ohio State against Texas. It was the 1 versus the 3. It was a game that everybody was looking forward to. It was a big time defensive battle though. Both quarterbacks looked a little bit off timing-wise. Defenses looked sharp. It was always one where, it was never going to be that high of scoring. The line was 46, which is quite high. But it was Ohio State that gets the job done. Arch didn't look great for Texas, and there's plenty of discourse of that going around, whether he's ready. His first real game in college was on the road against the defending national champions. Maybe the best defense in the country, too, for Ohio State. And Julian Sayin took a little bit to get going. He had a couple good throws, but still, he's not going to face a defense as good as Texas is every week either. So I think we can pump the brakes on declaring either of those two a bust. But it's Ohio State picks up a huge win. Texas still will go into SEC play with a great chance to make the college football playoff. You have to wait later in the week to see what we think about where they stand now in the college football playoff projections. We will do a video every week. I'm sure they'll be the projections will be all over the place early on, as the season goes on, we'll start to narrow in and it'll become more clear. But Ohio State really brought it defensively. The atmosphere was great. Not that was ever going to not be the case, but really, really good job from Ohio State on defense. They allowed their freshman quarterback to settle in, and then he made a couple big throws, and at the end of the day, they just needed 2 touchdowns. So good job for Ohio State. and we will see where they're ranked in our rankings tomorrow. Going down the list here in the Big Ten, we had Northwestern play against Tulane down in Louisiana. We previewed this game as one for a really good chance for Northwestern to pick up a big win, and unfortunately that did not happen for them. The Green Wave, who are my pick to be the Group of Five representative in the college football playoff, they were up early and often. It was 20-3 at halftime, and they never really looked back. Jake Retzlaff, the BYU transfer, it was just a really impressive performance from him. He might be on the Heisman watch list already. And Northwestern is going to struggle. Obviously, with Stone throwing 4 interceptions, it's might be a tough one for the Wildcats this year. And Tulane looks really good. And Tulane is a good team, probably ranked. But unfortunately for Northwestern, they come up well short. All right, we had Utah go on the road to the Rose Bowl to play UCLA, and it was an ugly one. We talked about Amaliava's making his debut for UCLA, what the rest of the team looked like, what Utah looked like, and it was an utter annihilation. Devin Dampier on Utah looks really good, and especially with how some of the other Big 12 teams looked, Utah might be the best team in that conference. And they'll be looking at a spot in the college football playoff. But UCLA, it might be more of a disaster over there than we were made to think. Just a lot of things going wrong, defense and offense. Timing wasn't there. Obviously not sharp. The UCLA is probably the biggest loser of the week. We expected them to at least make it into the middle of the pack, but they didn't. They didn't really do so. It was a tough one, and based on how Tennessee looked, you can already jump to conclusions based on who won that whole saga with Nico leaving in the spring. But the Bruins have got to figure things out. Utah's a good team, but they're not. They're not a top 5 team in the sport. So to lose by 33 at home, you got to have a lot of problems. And UCLA does. Defensively, they looked really poor, and offensively, they weren't sharp either. And if that sort of thing continues, it's going to be a long year for them in the Big Ten and for Coach Foster. So hopefully for their sake, they turn things around. All right, well, that's it for Week 1 preview. Obviously, Joe not here. He would have a lot to say. He'll be back next time, and he'll probably add, when we talk Week 2 preview, what he thought about those teams in Week 1. But just 2 losses for the conference in the 3 big games, really. I guess 4 if you want to count Nebraska. But the 4 opponents against power conference opponents were 2-2. So could have been worse. Ohio State wins the big one. None of the other playoff contenders at this point lose. So that's what it's going to be like looking forward. So obviously a little bit of a shorter one tonight, but wanted to stick to the schedule. So thank you everybody for tuning in, and